This episode is brought to you by Roon. Roon 1.8 is an immersive new music experience featuring a new look, new intelligence, and new features designed for music fanatics. Click the link in the description box below for more information.
In this video, we're going to try something a little bit different. Last weekend, we published a video about micro subwoofers. It's centered on the SVS 3000 micro, and I did heavy comparisons to the KEF KC62. It did very well. I'm very happy with the view count even after a few days. And there have also been some excellent comments. There's been about 200 comments so far. So what I thought I'd do in this video is tease out some of the better comments, some of the better questions, and respond to those. I've got them, I guess, sort of screenshot and put into an iPad document here as reference. And the first one relates to damping factor, and this comes from a chap called Les Ismore, and he writes, Darko, a well done presentation, thank you. A word about bass that is tighter than another sub, because I think I remember saying the KC62 bass seemed tighter than the SVS sub, right? And he says that this is most often the result of the amplifier inside having a higher damping factor. And he's possibly right, because damping factor is something we come across sometimes on integrated amplifiers, power amplifiers. Sometimes manufacturers make a big noise about this, and sometimes they don't even mention it. Sometimes it's on the spec sheet, sometimes it's not. And back to Les's comment, he says, this is much less critical for mids and highs, but for bass, it is a major factor. And the difference between 800 or 1000 watts of power, so he's referring to the KC62 and the SVS there and their internal amplifier modules. He's saying that in a home is really nothing, but damping factor is readily apparent. And a speaker cone returns to neutral and beyond. After its initial excursion, it generates a current back into the amp. When an amp has a high damping factor, that back and forth is mitigated. That's probably a fair approximation of what damping factor means. It's really to do with the relationship between the output impedance of the amp and the input impedance of the speaker driver. It's pretty technical, but it's a point well made, and I thought it was worth sort of emphasizing in this video. Next one then comes from Piotr Majda. I don't know how to say that. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name there, Piotr. And he's asking about the KC62, and he's asking, has your KC62 an issue with automatic turning on by low volume, as a lot of people mention about it? Yeah, I do. Sometimes it's slow to come on, certainly with low level signals. I'm pretty sure KEF have addressed this and made a rolling change to the way they produce KC62s. Mine was one of the very first made. So it still has that slight problem in it's not always on, and it takes a bit of a signal to bring it on. It doesn't bug me as much as it seems to bug other people, but I understand why that would annoy some people. The SVS absolutely doesn't have this issue, and you can activate an always on option on the back of the sub and in the app to keep it always on and never sort of faltering really. So maybe that's another advantage of the SVS, I don't know. Next comment, and this is a good one actually. What's this chap's name? P424, I can't even, DAPGRK I think it is. He writes, great review. One thing to mention about -3 dB specs is that it doesn't mean much if it doesn't have an associated volume with it. The 11 Hz of the KEF is likely at a lower volume than what SVS rates theirs at, in brackets, 85 dB. He's absolutely right. When KEF say that their sub can go down to 11 Hz, what we don't know is what's the SPL at 11 Hz. It might be a lot lower than, say, the SPL when it's producing an 80 Hz tone. So it's a little bit sneaky to kind of specify that as like this sub goes down to 11 Hz. At what volume level? So how many dBs down is it from maximum? So this chap's made a good point. He also writes, however, both subs would have even higher -3 dB points when playing at 90 or higher volumes. The SVS likely digs deeper in real-world usage, and the lower frequencies with longer waveforms sound naturally slower, giving the impression that the KEF is tighter. So I guess that also dovetails into the first comment about damping factor. Also pretty interesting, right? I also post my videos out on Patreon, and oftentimes, apart from this one actually, this one didn't go up early, but normally they go up a couple of days early. This one I was down to the wire. It took me a long time to make this micro subwoofer video. A lot of listening, a lot of note taking, 3 days to edit the damn thing. It just took forever. Anyway, one of my patrons, John Russell, asks, how important is my amplifier in a bass management setup? In other words, before I invest more in a sub, should I upgrade my amp to one with bass management options, or try to find a sub that takes care of all of that for me? And I responded basically that the way I see it now is that if you're adding a sub, it can be more important that the amplifier you're using has some kind of bass management smarts or room correction than worrying about how that amplifier's native sound differs to another amplifier's native sound. Because when your amp, like the Lingdorf, like the NAD, to a limited extent or more limited extent like the Blue Sound, when it designs the crossover for you, I think that's a bonus. When it also high pass filters the mains, that's also a bonus. It takes the stress off the amplifier in having to do low bass, because now the sub's amplifier is now taking care of the low bass. So then it becomes a question of, you're not just comparing native amplifier sounds, but you're looking at their feature set. And yeah, I think that's an important factor in this discussion about implementing subs in a hi-fi setup. I have to emphasize hi-fi setup because people are like, how come you don't talk about AVRs? Well, I've never talked about an AVR. I've never really talked about home theatre or anything like that. That's not really my remit, my area of expertise. I might get an AVR amp down the line and compare it to a similarly priced hi-fi stereo amp. I might do, but it's not really, my speed, not at all. There were a couple of comments about my mentioning the 5 millisecond delay that's caused by the DSP inside the SVS sub. Inside the KEF, it's half a millisecond. And the comments were basically, well, one of them is, okay, so one of them is from, what is this username, Staroff CCTV 94. He writes, in the late bass that you discussed, because 5 milliseconds delay means that the bass is delayed, therefore it's late. I really can't see 5 milliseconds making much of a difference. 5 milliseconds is 200 hertz, well above what the subwoofer will be playing, yes. If you cut off at 50 hertz, you'll be getting a maximum of a quarter wavelength out of sync, and highly doubt the human ear is able to differentiate phase differences like that, right? So I look at this slightly differently, and the way I understand it is that in 1 millisecond, sound travels at just over a foot, right? So 5 milliseconds, it would travel 5 feet. So if we're not to worry about this sort of 5 millisecond delay, then we don't really need to place our sub any more than a 5 foot degree of accuracy in the room, right? We can just get it roughly within 5 feet of where it kind of needs to be acoustically, optimally, to sound the best, right? So we don't need to fuss over that sort of extra last couple of feet or half a meter. But I don't know whether that's true. I'm not sure. I'm still on the fence on this one. I don't really know. I think some people do fuss over the position of their sub right down to maybe like 10 centimeters. So that would mean that any kind of millisecond delay would matter to them. So it's an interesting issue. I don't know. I mean, it's one reason I mentioned it when talking about the Lingdorf amplifier integration, but not about the Blue Sound. Because the Blue Sound, you can't do anything about the millisecond delay inside the amp and its software. And if I really wanted to fuss over it, what I would have to do is basically just bring the subwoofer 5 milliseconds, 5 feet, 5 feet further into the room. And that would almost be at my listening position here, which could be why Some people swear by having the sub placed right next to their couch or right behind their couch. It could be to do with that. Again, I don't know. If you do, hit us up in the comment section with a fairly decent technical explanation as to what's going on here. And then we can all learn something. Back to something a little bit more basic. Zeke Bruno says, not correct, John. The KEF app allows you to tune the sub on our listening position. Now what Bruno or Zeke is referring to here is the KEF Connect app. Yes, that can allow you to design the crossover and a couple of other settings which I can't remember off the top of my head. But the thing is, that KEF Connect app only talks to the LS50 Wireless 2, the LSX2, and the LS60 Wireless KEF speakers. And then when you've got the sub connected to those speakers, you can use the app to tell the speaker what to send to the sub. Crucially, and this is important, the KEF Connect app does not talk directly to the KEF subwoofer. And that's an important distinction to make. And I think that's where Zeke maybe has got a little bit confused. With the SVS subwoofer, as I showed at length in the video, the SVS app talks over Bluetooth directly to the sub. And we can change the settings in the sub, right? They're very, very different types of implementation here. One thing I like about videos like this idea of video, is it allows me to take a helicopter view of the comments rather than just tackle them individually. And taking a helicopter view of the micro subwoofer video, I saw that many of you have a keen interest in subwoofers by REL, mainly because they have what's called high level, or they enable high level connections. That means you can go straight out of your amp with speaker cable into the sub, and then from the sub to your speakers. I think that's how it works. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure many of you will if I didn't get that right. One person asked, Andrew Albers asked, I'd love to hear your take on REL and their proprietary high-level connection. Any chance you can get one in for review? This is a good time to remind people that, yeah, I could get one in for review, but I have to look at all the other products that I want to review this year. And I don't know whether I'll get time to do a REL. Phil Wright, who is a contributor to my website, did a REL written review a few months back. I think it was of the T5X, I think that's what it's called. I appreciate people and their enthusiasm for REL, but I kind of only wanted to do a couple of micro subwoofers. I did have one, or I do have one already earmarked for Velodyne if I'm going to do another micro sub. But we'll come to why I'm kind of sort of vacillating on this issue in a moment. Philip also hit me with a what about question. It's like, why not 2.2? And that's really where I want to go with my next subwoofer video. I might do another micro sub, but unlikely. I'd much rather tackle the idea of, like, this is ideas based rather than product based, right? I want my videos to be more sort of situation driven or idea driven than product driven. So I want to tackle a 2.2 system and look at what are the advantages of having two subwoofers as opposed to one, which did come up in the comments here and there. Lastly, well, not lastly, but almost lastly, M. Zrul wants to talk to me about the 130 Hertz bump that you might have seen on one of the Room EQ Wizard frequency response graphs in my video, because I put an arrow to it going, is this the speaker? Is this the room? And he's saying, it's not only you who has a 130 Hertz bump, it's almost everybody because of the typical room dimensions. It's built into the maths of the room. So like 8 to 9 foot ceiling, 12 to 14 foot width. Yes, you need to invert RIR. And I'm guessing that means something to do with impulse response. Also, it would make lots of sense to have two subs, here we are, and cross at 150 to 200 Hertz, because the mains midwoofers produce a lot of intermodular distortion and non-linear distortions when they attempt to play. And then he's written something that I absolutely do not understand. So if you know what that technical bit means, please help us all understand it in the comments below. One thing that I have noticed about these subwoofer videos, right, and this kind of relates to my coverage of FutureFi. I got this comment. This is the only comment like this that I've seen in any of my subwoofer videos, right? Let me read it to you and then I'll explain to you why this kind of surprises me. It comes from a user called the Chopcat, and he writes, "It would be interesting to see how these packaged and preset subs compare with a good old-fashioned passive sub with something like a Hypex plate amp and a fiddle with the accompanying programmable filter software. It seems that, like cars with sat-navs in them, the inbuilt technology that you can actually play with will become obsolete very quickly. Maybe with more traditional, in quotes, kit, with the tech bit added on, like the Hypex filter software, you can hang on to the main bits for much longer and update the software bits on their own." Fair point. Now, the thing is, this surprises me is because, yeah, I'm talking about subwoofers that have inbuilt amplifiers and inbuilt DSP. Now, when I enthuse about these when they are speakers, I get lots of comments from you guys going, "Oh my God, I'm never doing that because the amplifiers are going to be out of date in 5 years." And yet, when I talk about the same thing in subwoofers, apart from this one guy, crickets, right? So you can see where there seems to be some kind of disconnect there, right? You guys seem to be very happy to jump up and down about streaming active loudspeakers, mainly the active bit and the amp being the speaker, but with subs, I think most of you seem to be already across the line and are okay with the amplifier being in the sub. Lastly, a bit of fun. I mentioned that boomers like to call techno Doof. Ekank Durk says that in Brazil, techno is still called tuts tuts, even by the newer generations. He means tuts tuts tuts. And then Easy E, he says that wherever he is from, techno is known as uns, which is, I've heard that in Eastern Europe actually, uns. So yeah, that I think about wraps it up for my take on the comments that you guys left, guys and girls, on the micro subwoofer video that we just made. This video, as you can probably tell, is an experiment. If it goes well, I'll do another one for the video we've got coming up about the Marantz, what's it called? The Marantz Model 40N streaming amplifier. Olaf is nodding because he could tell that I was about to get that wrong. So I hope this was reasonably interesting. I hope this allows us to kind of talk about some of the smaller points. Obviously, I can't get to every comment. So in the next video, if we do it again, I'll pick out the most interesting comments and questions if you have them, and we'll tackle them in another video. So yeah, if you like this video, hit the like button down below. If you like my attitude to high-end audio, and that now I'm trying to kind of, I guess, engage with the comments a little bit more than I'm used to or have time for, basically. Most of you know that my comments are moderated by a third party. I do read every comment. I read absolutely every single one. And if anybody's rude, if she hasn't hosted it, my moderator that is, I do. So if you can live with that, because I want to create a community that is polite and courteous and respectful. If you like that idea, then consider subscribing to this channel. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.